They were in a practice that the dentist was really wanted to invest in them and give them some training to not only give them more control over the income that they were a part of, but also just not just doing profies all day long, like really expanding their ability to care for patients. Remember, if we look at every dollar that comes in to the dental practice, in the typical dental practice, 70 cents of that's going back out, right? Whether that is in just, compensation for the team, overhead, equipment, loans, things like that. Your desire is for me to get to this number, and I need your help because I have all this open time. I could be really productive with a particular patient, but then if I have 2 hours open after that, then it's just going to dilute that production and we're not going to get to that goal. So what can I do to help reduce open time?
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 165. My name is Andrew.
And this is Michelle, enjoying a lovely cab brought to you by the townie meeting that I just came from. I was a speaker, and they gave me this lovely bottle of cab that I'm enjoying right now, speaking to you fine people.
Was that because they know that you are a fan of the wine, or because they gave everyone some wine?
I don't know. I should have asked that. I don't like to question the reasons people give me the alcohol. Yeah, I don't usually question them. I'm just excited. I take it, give my thanks, and drink it.
I love it. And it was good. Townie meeting was good.
Yeah. It was great. I ended up speaking twice, Thursday and Friday, and got to see some of my work fam and dental friends and made some new ones, which was really cool. So it was great. And you just got back from Tokyo?
Tokyo, yeah.
Well, international traveler. You're trying to rival me these days.
I'll never catch up. But yeah, manager Mike and I went to Tokyo and had a good old time. Just two brothers.
Y'all appreciated your Godzilla onesie?
Yeah, that was an interesting little thing. We were in go-karts riding around Tokyo in onesies. And I don't think that I posted this part yet publicly, but we went to this very beautiful overlooking the city kind of thing at night with all the lights. And there was this couple there and they were taking wedding photos. And so, of course, all six of us dressed up as Mario characters decided that we wanted to go and get pictures with them and celebrate their special day. So we did. We crashed their little wedding photo session thing. I'm sure that they really appreciated that.
Yeah. So was that a thing that everybody was doing?
What do you mean, like dressing up part?
Yeah, like that's just a normal thing when you go ride these go-karts that you're dressing up?
Exactly. Yeah. Like that, it's not, it's not required, but it's heavily encouraged.
Well,
that makes any sense.
Why would you not?
Because you look ridiculous and all the little people are like, hi. And their parents are like, oh, keep waving to them. That's fine. They like that. And I'm like, no, don't keep waving at me. This is uncomfortable. But yeah.
And then landed and back at work. Man.
Yeah. I mean, I landed at 7 p.m. and was work at 7 a.m. the next day. Just going right to it. It's different coming back from Asia to the West Coast. I think it's pretty okay. But
you crazy.
Yeah. Anyway.
You crazy.
So yes, we have a show today for everyone.
We do. We have that weekly episode thing, that interview.
We have the podcast. Is that what they call it?
This labor of love of ours.
Hey, speaking of labor of love, though, can I say thank you so much for everyone who pushes out on social media the fact that we have a podcast. There was. Yeah. Can I read something? I don't know if you saw this. It's in Dental Hygiene Network, which is the Facebook group. Can I read this to you real quick?
Please.
Stephanie Vispera said, I was wondering what kind of things you do to keep your mind sharp in our profession. I know there's CEs, but do you listen to podcasts, any YouTube channels you follow? books, etc. I just feel like I've plateaued. I just want to get an idea of what y'all do so I can try it and be better. Thank you. And so there was, this was posted kind of last night, like less than 24 hours ago. There's 36 comments, and of them, multiple people said, yes, a Tale of Two Hygienists is the best. Danielle Oakley actually said 2 podcasts I listen to, Biofilm Factor and a Tale of Two Hygienists. So
love that biofilm factor.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. So real quick, just shout out to Cindy, Danielle, Dana, and I want to say it's Carrie, but it's spelled Ceri. So if I'm saying it wrong,
so sorry.
I'm really sorry. But I don't know you personally. But thank you so much for just putting us out there into the world and telling people to listen to us. It makes all the difference in the world, and hopefully it helps people.
And I think today's podcast is going to be another one of those that really helps people. And the whole reason we started the podcast was because we all have felt like we've plateaued in our career, and it's all about learning and getting that knowledge and being able to get yourself out of it and not getting sucked into the monotony and the burnout and being able to get yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
And in this week's episode, we are talking with Rachel Wall from Inspired Hygiene. We're really looking at hygiene compensation and how do you get paid and why do you get paid one way or the other and why that works for some and not others.
Yeah, she goes over some really good models. I think really good things to think about. I know we've talked about this in the past about kind of being business oriented. This is a business, whether we would like to see it that way or not. And it's important for us to be successful, but we can also be successful helping our patients at the same time and helping the practice grow. And she brings up some really good points that we all need to be thinking about. So really sit back and enjoy this episode with Rachel Wall.
Our friends at Zirc Manufacturers, who you know for their innovative products that allow dental teams to be happier and work more efficiently, have a great offer for you ATOthers. When you buy 2 50 packs of the pink petals, you get 1 EasyJet Slim 8-instrument cassette for free. Yep, that is a free cassette. These are 2 awesome products. The pink petal slips onto the suction you are already using and provides hands-free suction. The EasyJet Slim holds your instruments, and because of its slim design, it takes up less room in the autoclave, ultrasonic, and your storage cabinets. Thank you to Zirc for this great offer. Use the code TALE8, that's TALE, the number 8, to receive your free Slim EasyJet cassette when you purchase 2 50 packs of the pink petal. And check out the rest of their product line. If you're looking for a colorful way to improve your infection control, stay organized, and elevate the patient's experience during the dental visit.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine. Listeners, we are always excited to have Rachel Wall on the podcast. She's been on, it's probably been over a year now. Yeah, because it was like the Voices of Dentistry a year ago.
Yep.
And so we're excited to have you back on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. And so for people who are not as familiar with Inspired Hygiene or read some of your amazing articles or had the chance to watch you present, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm a hygienist first and foremost. Well, I'm a wife and a mom, daughter, all that first and foremost. And then next, I'm a hygienist of almost 30 years, which is kind of crazy. Graduated from Guilford Technical Community College in Greensboro, North Carolina in 91. And then I worked for a couple of years. We'll talk about that. Then went back to school in Chapel Hill and finished there. Go Heels. Like that. This is, we're recording this on the heels of a really great win against Duke last night.
Don't even get me started. Really Zion Williamson wasn't playing. I don't even want to get started right now, okay?
Well, really a team is a team. It's not just one person.
Well, he is an amazing person. Number 1 in the draft. Whatever. We don't even get started, okay?
Yeah, go Duke. We'll talk about the shoe incident. So anyway, Then I worked as a hygienist. Still, have an opportunity to fill in and care for my family and things like that. But what has happened over the last 15 years is that I built an organization called Inspired Hygiene. And what we do is we present continuing education. We also coach privately in office with dental practices on really developing their hygiene department, really inspiring and engaging their hygiene department to feel like they get that spark back for what they really love about hygiene after maybe a lot of years of being in a rut. And what that does is it just elevates the services they're delivering to their patients, the systems that they're running in their practice, which creates less stress for the team, and then also generally results in a lot more profitability. So that's what Inspired Hygiene is. And we have a team of other hygienists who are coaches that go into these practices and really help them kind of get to the next level. And we've really been very fortunate to be able to do that with a lot of teams across the US and even a couple in Canada. So we've had the advantage of kind of seeing behind the curtain in a lot of practices and seeing some really cool things that work that I had never thought of. And then seeing some things that maybe didn't work and helping them work through solutions around that.
And so today we wanted to really look at compensation models for the hygiene team or department. And look, I guess let's start with, because I personally have not worked with any other model other than hourly and probably working with that 33-to-1 or 33% model. So what else is out there?
And then I'd like to ask Andrew, how about you? What's your experience with this?
I have done hourly and salary, and I guess it's like a salary base plus production bonus, I guess is kind of what you call it, right? So guaranteed bottom, and then you can earn more.
Yep. So that's been my experience too, whether that is with a personal production or a team production type of bonus. And that, I would say that's probably still the most common, is an hourly or salary base. And then the ability to earn more through a team bonus, where everybody really shares in whatever's over that basic amount of money that's needed to run the practice and make sure everybody gets paid. My experience is interesting because I've had the advantage of working in some really progressive practices, but that is not necessarily where I started. So, I started out working in a very small town practice in Danville, Virginia, with two really great dentists. And it was old school. That was 1991. There were no computers. And, this is, I feel like I'm talking to my kids because they're like, oh, here we go. We're going to roll our eyes again about back in the day. But we're still all relatively young, and yet we worked in practices where there were no computers. Everything was done on a book, an appointment book. And the way it worked in this practice was when the doctor left my operatory after doing a hygiene exam, he would write down the fee. And it was not always the same for the same procedure.
Oh.
So, but we didn't ask questions. And we really weren't given any information had no idea about the production of the practice or anything. All we knew was that we were getting paid. We had the annual Christmas party, and that was just kind of it. It was just a, real traditional kind of old school practice. Yes.
Sorry, I felt really weird. Like I'm raising my hand. So was insurance a part of this practice in 1991?
I have no idea.
Oh,
I have no idea.
Okay, then.
So we really were not informed on any of that. And there was a business team that was, made up of one receptionist. I'm sure there was some kind of dental benefits for our patients, but the rest of us had no idea.
Wow.
So then I moved to North Carolina to go back to school, and I had the opportunity to work for a complete 180 practice, right? So 100 miles away, there was this practice that had multiple consultants at that point, was a large multi-doctor practice owned by a female who had previously been a hygienist. They were currently working with a fortune management coach who was awesome. And they had very specific goals in place, very transparent with regards to the production and all of that of the practice and what was expected of us. It was a fee-for-service practice at that time. So I think probably then we would process the insurance claims for the patients, but the payments would go to the patients and the patients would pay the practice. Yeah. So that's, was back in that day when there weren't PPO plans to my knowledge. I mean, maybe there were then, probably there were, but we were not participating in any of that. But it was just really different. And so then the other thing that happened too was a lot of continuing education, and the dentists would encourage us and include us in a lot of that high level continuing education. And I really had to step up my game, but it was awesome because they would really sit down. I remember the owner, Dr. Weiss, this is kind of a cool story too, is she would sit down and explain, if you asked, okay, so why did you recommend a crown on that tooth instead of a filling? And she would draw a picture of the tooth. And then here's what happens when we have, this tooth has been undercut because it had an amalgam. And then when it gets decay and we have to go in there and take all that out, there's just nothing left to hold a filling. So I got a huge amount of education on restorative and cosmetic dentistry and all of that in that practice. And it really was pretty amazing. Fast forward to a year ago, we had connected on social media and kind of stayed in touch a little bit that way. And I'd had an opportunity to really thank her for how she mentored me and what that meant to my career overall, what I'm doing now, because it really was an integral part. And then we ended up at the same conference here in Charlotte last summer. So I got to see her and her husband in person and just let them know how much I appreciate them. And that was really cool. Kind of full circle moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was nice. So back to, what we see everything from straight hourly with no incentives, right? The team having no involvement in the profitability of the practice or how it does financially, to full commission. And we've even seen something interesting we saw several years back at a practice in Texas was a pooled commission. So there were about 4 or 5 hygienists in this department. They all were paid a percentage of their total production of all the hygienists. So what that meant too was, I know you guys don't have the advantage of seeing everybody's faces, but
see Aaron's
so
face.
it actually worked quite well for them because they had a standard, right? They had a very clear standard. They were all very calibrated, very much on the same page. And what happened, this is good, even a little more cringy, but it worked for them, was they had a schedule and they had patients in all the columns. But if I was finished at 2:50 and there was a 3:00 patient that was already there on Michelle's schedule, then I would go ahead and take that 3:00 patient and Michelle would see the patient that was on my schedule. So everybody's patients were everybody.
See, that makes me cringe.
Oh,
Whereas, we are such a different clinician.
And I'm like, we call that first chart up. The first chart up. And if you have 2 or 3 people working on the same team, just take the patient, just get them done.
Yes.
Patients love it.
Right. They do, because they don't have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And also here's the thing too, is you avoid that thing of, well, where's Michelle? Mm-hmm. I always see Michelle. I don't know if I can come in today, so there's obviously certain systems that must be in place for that to work. The thing that I saw was when they hired a new hygienist that came in, she worked hourly for a while before she participated in the pool. So they really took her under their wing. They trained her. And then once they saw that she was, performing and working at their level, then she was part of the pool. But that was the first time I'd seen that. But that actually worked quite well. So we've seen that. We see a lot of base plus commission. So, you have a guaranteed base that's usually a little bit lower maybe than what the going rate is. But then you have an opportunity of once you hit that 3-to-1. So let's say, I'm just making up numbers. Let's say the base is $300 a day, or let's say it's $30 an hour. And once your average hourly production hits $90 an hour, you've hit the 3-to-1, which we'll get to in a second. And then anything over that, then you're paid a percentage of that. Mm-hmm. So then you have an opportunity to continually increase your income. Your income also increases as fees increase. I mean, it encourages the hygienist, I feel like, to look at new services and bring things to patients. And anyway, so we've seen everything, all of that, kind of across the board.
So do you feel a lot of the compensation models are definitely dependent if they work on it with certain team members? Like the one that obviously, if Andrew and I work together in a practice in that model of who first chart up, my anxiety would never make that work. So I wouldn't be a good team member for that.
Well, maybe you might not be right now at the beginning, But once you understood that that was the philosophy of the practice, right, you would need to be comfortable with that. So it's all about expectations, right? What's that?
Yeah.
The whole thing about upset comes usually just from unmet expectations or unexpressed expectations. So if you were interviewing for that position, it would be really smart for the person interviewing you to say, hey, here's how we run. You know, we run a first chart up model, and here's how this works. How do you feel about that? And you would need to decide if you felt strongly enough about wanting to work with this team that you said, you know what, I'm going to need to change my opinion about that. And I'd like to come work for a day or two and see how it goes.
It does take some getting used to, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So I think that your point about certain individuals is true. However, I think that everyone should at least be open to adapting and learning new ways. You know, whether we make the decision that we want to do that or not is totally different, but just look at it from all the different perspectives and see, okay, well, maybe that, you know, that works for you guys and it works well. But that does bring up a topic of, I do think that need to be written expectations of the practice and of the hygienist with how are we going to behave? How are we going to operate in this model? And what are those expectations? Because I think that's where a lot of things get wonky, is when that's not really fully expressed.
There's a term in infection control of like legacy errors. And when most job descriptions and how things are not written out, that's when those legacy errors do occur, because things evolve so easily and so gradually sometimes that all of a sudden you're just like, wait a second, this was never how it was supposed to be. This is just what you're doing every day.
Well, and a lot of times that's not noticed until someone new comes in, or a coach or consultant comes in, or the dentist meets with a financial advisor and they say, how long have you been paying the hygienist 50% commission on your exams? Right. So we had a client that, you know, had started working with the dental CPA, and she, you know, referred him to us and said, okay, here's the situation is we're paying a 50% commission to the hygienists, and they're getting that on the doctor exams. And it is not long term. This dentist had purchased the practice, right? So he inherited these legacy errors, and it was not a financially sustainable model. So then it brought us in to say, how can we work through this? And he said, look, I want to keep these hygienists. I really value these hygienists, and I also have to do what is financially viable for this business, for it to stay in business and do well. So what we did, and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but we'll back up in a second. Sorry. is we were able to help the hygienist understand how the compensation for any team member needs to be in line with, or needs to be in a certain percentage of the overall expenses of the business. And then also at the same time, they had a lot of opportunity to increase their level of care for their patients. So at the same time that their compensation was being adjusted, their production was increasing because all of a sudden they had more services and better, higher level services to offer patients. So it worked out. It was not easy and it was not comfortable, but me and their coach kind of strategized. It was a tiered thing. It wasn't just all of a sudden you were at 50% and then you were at 30%. It's like, okay, over the course of 4 or 5 months, here it is. And everything was laid out to the hygienist, and they had the opportunity to say, peace out. Mm-hmm. But the thing was that they weren't going to be able to go anywhere else and make
that much money.
Yeah. They were in a practice that the dentist was really wanted to invest in them and give them some training to not only give them more control over the income that they were a part of, but also just not just doing profies all day long, like really expanding their ability to care for patients.
So should we go back to that 3-to-1 and then jump off? Because I have more follow-up questions to that. I loved your video, by the way, and we'll post the video in the show notes. But the video that you talk about this whole 3-to-1 thing is phenomenal.
Thank you. So the 3-to-1 is an industry standard that's been held for a long time, and there may be a new industry standard that comes out, at some point, but that's kind of That's kind of the business standard for hygiene compensation is this 3-to-1. And what it means is that the hygienist, to hit the first point of profitability for the hygiene department to contribute profit to the practice, is that the hygienist must be producing 3 times their compensation. So if the hygienist is making $60,000 a year, that their net production is $180,000 a year or more. And if we think about a pie, right, a round shaped pie, and we divide that into 3 parts, then one part of that is hygiene compensation. The other part is hygiene overhead. So overhead is all the things that it takes to run the hygiene department except for compensation, right? So the chair that the doctor likely has a lease payment on the equipment in that operatory. The lease on the building or the mortgage on the building there's that operatory is part of that. Disposables, right? So autoclave bags, gauze, like all those different things, instruments, all of those things that it takes to run the hygiene department. And then that remaining third is for profit to go back in the business so that hygiene is contributing to the profitability of the business, to the financial health and sustainability of that business so that they have a job and you can care for these patients, and so that the dentist can then hopefully reinvest some of that profit, some or all of that profit into, newer equipment and continued education and just, renovating the practice, right? So it gives a better reflection of the brand and you have a nice place to work and all of those kinds of things. Yeah. So when you're at 50%, so when the hygienists are making 50% commission, then there's not that, there's no profit there, right? They're just breaking even. And remember too, like there are business team members also that are needed to run the hygiene department, right? To help verify appointments and answer the phone. And hygiene is a hugely important part of a dental practice because those patients are coming back more frequently to see the hygienist than they are. So it's all this, you hope it is this symbiotic relationship, right? Where all parties benefit from each other, that you hope that that's now. There may be some unique different models, Andrew, that I don't know about because, like I've never worked in Arizona, for example. I was talking to a hygienist recently who for a while practiced as an independent hygienist in her own practice. And the dentist said, I will gladly pay you 50% commission to take over these patients. So I do not have to manage any of that. But my guess is that she was also managing the recare, as far as making sure patients came back in the kind of a logistic side of all of that too. And she also was responsible for the instruments that were being used. You know what I mean? So some of the overhead was not there for that dentist. So that's the 3-to-1. And it's really interesting when very few hygienists that we've worked with have ever heard about that or they understand the concept when we explain it, but have been exposed to that concept. And that is a request often, of the dentist that we work with is, can you explain this to them? Because if I explain it, it's just coming from the business owner and it doesn't always come across great. But if you guys explain it, then maybe they'll understand it a little bit better and understand how there has to be, in order for pay increases and things like that to happen, there has to be a certain amount of profitability there. And we all have responsibility. The business owner has responsibility to make sure the business is profitable. And then we as hygienists have responsibility to at least be aware of that and know where we stand.
I think that one of the misconceptions that ends up happening with the hygiene community is that a lot of us have heard about the 3-to-1, but we assume that the 2/3 then is pure profit, right? That 1/3 that's going to the overhead, people are not really taking that into consideration. And even the 1/3 that goes to the business for reinvestment into the different things that you mentioned isn't really being considered either. So they feel like, and I should say we feel like sometimes, that it's a uneven share of the workload and the profits, and it's really not.
Well, and also think about this too. So 2 things. One is, remember, if we look at every dollar that comes in to the dental practice, in the typical dental practice, 70 cents of that's going back out, right? Whether that is in just compensation for the team, overhead, equipment, loans, things like that. The other piece is the whole risk versus reward. So, the dentist is taking all the risk. Now, I'm not saying as a hygienist, we have made investments in our career. And, our risk is we're going and working in this practice, hoping that it is going to allow us to have the best expression of our career possible. We're going to work with someone who supports us, and their work is going to be at the caliber that we would expect, right? Because our reputation is also tied to the dentist that we work with. And think about, the risk that the dentist takes. I mean, they invested a lot of time and money in their education, and then they've put their livelihood on the line for, this building, all this equipment, making sure that they're responsible for, everyone getting, payroll getting met, everyone getting paid. And sometimes the dentist doesn't get paid. And as a business owner, I mean, you guys, I think everybody should have the opportunity to kind of be on the other end of that, other side of that table at least once in your life, because it's quite sobering. But I understand that. I mean, I've been on both sides now, and I see that. I mean, I remember too working for a dentist at one point that things had gotten cut, and the bonus amount had gotten cut and all that. And then all of a sudden, the dentist shows up in a brand new, quite expensive car.
Yeah.
And that does not go well. Like for business owners, you gotta be conscious about some of those things. And yes, you work hard and you deserve it. And at the same time, I think it is important to just understand the perception that the team has that one, maybe one Mercedes, but two at the same time. Like that was a little hard to swallow.
Two in a beach house? You're kidding me.
Right.
And I think we talked about that the last time, because I think a lot of and a lot of my pushback came from being in an office where you could see profits being made, but I had to fight people for new instruments or, to put quality back into the hygiene program, which of course creates this contentious, bitter relationship in that business side of it.
Yeah.
But when you do explain it and it's coming from a third party, it does make a little bit more sense. And Tracy Butler, I've taken a few of her courses, and she's asked, looking at implants and surgeries and things like that, do you know how much it even costs to set up your room?
Oh man.
And I was like, not even a clue. I wouldn't even try to guess at how much, the patient napkin and the gauze and the disposing, all the powder for my, air and go, all those things. I have no idea. And I think when you break it down, you'd probably appreciate a little bit more, not overusing things and understanding how much it really does cost to.
Yeah. And when you, when you think about, right. And I remember at one point a dentist revealing and saying, okay, guys, my Amex bill is $20,000 a month or $30,000 or whatever. It was multiple tens of thousands of dollars a month on supplies, so when you think about having to shoulder that, and that's coming from stuff that you have to buy ahead, not knowing that there's going to be patients coming in, right? So you have to often pay for that ahead of time, and then just hoping that train still moves along and those patients still come in, and there's not a huge snowstorm that all of a sudden you're shut down for 3 days or 4 days or whatever and making nothing. So there's a flip side to all of it. And one thing, as an aside, Michelle, that I have learned, because one of the things that we do when we go in practice is we do look at the instruments that the hygienists have to work with. Because if we are encouraging them to do more, let's say, periotherapy or high level services, then the hygienists have got to have the proper tools. And they're also being asked often to do more in the same period of time. Well, then you've got to make sure you're working efficiently and utilizing your ultrasonics. Well, if you've got an ultrasonic that's way outdated, it's not going to happen. So we look at that, and we will always bring those things to the dentist and say, here's the deal. You have CERAC 2020, and the hygienist is working with the ultrasonic instrument from 1995. It's time. If you're asking them to do this, it's time to update that. So we also are their advocate.
Nice. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I notice a lot of times too, the hygienist will say, well, I've been told that I can't order any instruments. And then when we bring that to the dentist, they say, well, I don't understand why they say that, because certainly I want them to have, and sincerely, they say, certainly I want them to have what they need. But somewhere along the line, there was a communication breakdown and something was communicated, like maybe it was a scary month or like, you guys, like we got to put on hold ordering anything new. And, or maybe there's someone in charge of ordering and they were given the directive of just, you guys got to keep this really tight. And so when we can open that conversation up, it just very often, I've never seen a bad result, honestly. And oftentimes we say, look, there's going to be a budget for instruments. That typically works the best, is there's a budget for instruments every month and it doesn't roll over. So that means you've got to really keep up with what needs to be replaced and order it so that there's not like this giant order that needs to be made, in 1 month, that we can kind of spread out the costs.
I think you tend to take care of your stuff a little bit more that way too, because I've purchased a few things now and I'm quite protective of all of those things and way more so than when it was someone else making. Even though it was something I needed to use, I was like, hey, make sure you clean that off really well and don't put it in it. But now I'm like, where's that going? What are you doing with it?
Same.
Nope, that doesn't go there.
Yeah, these are labeled
thrown out on the tray.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, right. And stuff happens, right? And
it does.
I've done that before. Something got thrown out, and the dentist was, okay, it happens. It's going to happen from time to time. If it happened over and over, then it becomes a problem. But yeah.
Kind of along that same line of like throwing things away, increasing that overhead will sometimes kind of get our 3-to-1 out of balance, right? Like maybe we're not going to be hitting our goals then if all of our other expenses and stuff go up.
That's a good question. So that would involve quite a bit of math. And I will tell you that.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I know most dental practices, I don't think, carve out exactly, this is how many gauze are allocated to hygiene or that kind of thing. However, if they have let's say they have a team bonus plan that is based on keeping expenses at a certain percentage, then yes, that is where that could come in. Is, if they have something that is based on, there are some bonus plans that are based on compensation being at a certain amount. There's some of just general overhead being at a certain amount. And then once you hit whatever's over that amount, then is a percentage of that is distributed to the team. So yes, excessive use of supplies could affect the amount of that bonus pool if it's used as an overhead calculation. Yes.
Are there also other things that would make it so that we're not hitting our 3-to-1, like on our end of it? Like maybe we're not producing as much as we should be, or like what happens if we don't, what happens if it's our fault that we're not hitting the 3-to-1?
So I think then asking the dentist for help, so that's the first step of any tough conversation, right? Is I need your help. Is either the dentist is saying, we have this goal to hit 3-to-1, but maybe I haven't explained that well enough or what that means or really nailed down what that number is and how can we work together to get to that number. And then the hygienist saying, so I understand that your desire is for me to get to this number and I need your help because I have all this open time and every amount of open time, I could be really productive with a particular patient, but then if I have 2 hours open after that, then it's just going to dilute that production and we're not going to get to that goal. So what can I do to help reduce open time and really seek out some solutions to that? Maybe it is the hygienist really being willing to sit down and be prepared, make some high quality calls to patients that have fallen out of recare. Maybe it is, what can I say to the patient when I'm scheduling their next appointment to build value in that so that they're going to want to come back and say, okay, the next time you come, remember you have this implant on the lower right. And it's really important for us to evaluate, how clean that's staying because you don't want to have infection around that implant. You invested a lot in that. So it's really important for you to come and see us every 3 months. So, building some kind of personalized piece of value in that appointment. Maybe it could be, I just feel like I'm doing all these pro-fees and some of these patients really need something other than a pro-fee. So, but I'm not sure exactly how to code it or how to schedule it. So I need some help with that. Mm-hmm. Or then coming up with a plan and saying, here's what I think we need to do. And hey, this is actually going to increase our production to get us to this goal. So yeah, I think a lot of times it is scheduling And it is also services, the varying types of services that we're offering.
I would imagine too, that kind of goes both ways, having that conversation when the dentist when you kind of set these patients up and they crush the treatment plan. Or I've worked in a practice where the dentist would almost scare patients off.
Like giving them too much information? Yeah.
Too much information, too much treatment planning, and the patient just never came back. And so like I was just struggling to keep my schedule filled, and they're like, call more patients. I'm like, there are no more to call. I am stuck.
Yeah, I've been calling the same patients over and over for the last 6 months. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that is something that we help with too, is calibrating, right? Getting everybody on the same page. And here's the thing, if hopefully there are some dentists listening, right, is when you expect for the team to help tee up treatment, which I think that the team should totally participate in that, because they have more time with the patients. For one thing, the doctor exam is going to be way more efficient and effective if we've already at least taken a photo and made the patient aware of what the problem is, right? And the dentist, I believe, and I've asked a lot of dentists this, they're more likely to get up from a procedure and come do a hygiene exam when they know they don't have to start the whole thing from scratch, right? Because that takes a lot of energy and time. And they're in the middle of some other intense procedure that we really don't know what it is. And it's difficult. So what we do is we educate them on getting the team calibrated with your treatment philosophy so that you guys are all on the same page as much as possible. And then when you're not, right, if you go in and Michelle, you've teed up an implant and the dentist really feels like this tooth could be treated with a crown and we could keep this tooth, saying, you know what, I see exactly why Michelle recommended that. And that might be the ultimate treatment plan. And I think actually because of this and this, you've got the option of trying to preserve this tooth and do the crown. So now that dentist has acknowledged you in front of the patient and also been able to give the alternate option. Because what happens if the dentist says, well, no, we wouldn't take that tooth out. I mean, we can just do a crown. Even if they don't say anything specifically negative, it's just sometimes it's the tone and the patient picks up on it, then most of the time that hygienist is going to shut down and then will not continue to recommend treatment. So making sure that communication is very delicate and it's careful so that it's continuing to build that hygienist confidence, because then they're going to do more of that. And then the other thing is finding out maybe why the dentist is nervous about maybe your treatment plan. Maybe it wasn't that the treatment didn't fit the philosophy. Maybe the dentist is tired and burnout. What we run into sometimes when we have those conversations is it's when we're doing the treatment calibration and the team has told us, they said, okay, so we've done this and we tee treatment up, and the dentist just says, oh, we can just watch it. So then again, having a third party bring that up sometimes is really helpful to say, okay, so when does the dentist usually support you moving that forward? And basically what we just say is you've got to let the team tee this up for you and just you be the bobblehead.
Yeah. And Tony Stefanu and I have had this long-standing discussion about that, of like, sometimes they just don't feel like being the bad guy right there. They just had a crown that went really crappy and they come in and they just don't want to like confirm bad news maybe for the patient. And so then they come off as like, we'll deal with this next time. And I'm seething because you just worked so hard on that.
Yeah. Or maybe they know they've just worked on the patient's husband and they that patient spent $5,000 on, the lower right, and they need $5,000 more dollars in every quadrant. They know those things, but those things should be discussed. Say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with, so that then you can be the one to recommend the treatment. And all they have to say is, yep, what Michelle recommended is right. And here's the thing, like you can do this at your pace. These are the things that I recommend that are really urgent, because if you don't treat this, it's going to be a more extensive and expensive problem. And then here are the things that we can work on over time. And I think the same is true with the big treatment plans, is maybe saying, hey, I know we want to tell them everything that's going on. However, would it be possible for us to just tell them, here's where we recommend you start today. there's a lot of things going on, right? We've looked at the pictures in all the quadrants and you see all these areas of, cavities and old fillings. And here's where to start first.
No, I think that's reasonable.
They can grab that without us presenting like the financials of the whole giant treatment plan, is just know that there's other things coming, but this is just the first thing. And maybe it's one quadrant or 2 teeth.
Good advice. So bring Rachel in.
So yeah, we can be a buffer. So that's another thing though, too, that we have seen from time to time is hygienists also having a bit of a stake in doctor production. So I've seen that, as well as even like a 1% bonus on doctor production because they're involved in teeing that up.
Ah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's, it's really hard if you've got multiple hygienists to track that. So it might just be, again, it might be a pooled thing. It might be, okay, hygiene team, we're expecting everybody to step up on this. There has to be an intro photo on every patient that needs treatment. And, we've spent time calibrating the team. So then the next step is you identify the problem with the patient and what the possible solution is. So when the dentist comes in, it's like very succinct. And then as long as those things are happening, then there's going to be this additional bonus here on restorative. So that's another thing we've looked at.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an ideal compensation model that you propose for the masses?
I would say the one that we have seen work the best for both parties is a base plus commission after they hit the 3-to-1. And then I would also say with that is if there is some kind of team bonus, that the hygienists are still involved in that as well, because when they're not, then they're often, it creates a divide. And then it's like the hygiene team and then the rest of the team. And that's never good. So if you have a team bonus, then so perhaps it could look something like the hygienist has a base hourly or daily or however that might be. And then once they hit the 3-to-1, then they make a certain percentage of whatever's over that, right? So let's say the base is $30 an hour. After they hit $90 an hour in net production, right? So this has to be collectible production. Then maybe they make 20% of whatever's over that. So then if their average is $150 an hour, then they're making 20% of that $60 that's over that. And maybe if there is, a team bonus that they're still involved with, I would say that percentage amount would probably need to be 15 to 20%. I don't think it would go any higher than that, because you still want to keep it in that 3-to-1.
Is it 15 to 20% of the day, like all of the day's production?
The overage.
Of the whole day, or of the 3-to-1 coming out of the hygiene? Because you said the team production.
If there's a team bonus, then the hygienist's percentage of their production overage, right? What's over the 3-to-1, their personal one, could be 15 to 20%, depending on how big the team bonus is. If there's no team bonus, then that could go to 20, 25%. It could be a little bit higher. We never recommend I really don't ever recommend hygiene commission to be over 30% because then that keeps you at the 3-to-1, right? It gives you a little bit of buffer there. If maybe you have a hygiene coordinator, that's helping with hygiene, and you've got to account for that compensation somewhere in there. Or maybe there is some type of additional team compensation. So that 30% kind of takes into account and still can keep you in that 3-to-1.
That makes sense.
Yes. I think it'd be good to look too at some things that work well when there's a commission involved, and maybe some things that we've seen not go so well when there's a commission involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to know what you guys have seen.
I've personally not worked amongst that, but I've, colleagues in the area. You go to like your membership happy hour and people are recommending, and I always worked for perio, so I always had referring practices. So I always knew these hygienists and saw their patients mutually. And I was like, but why did you recommend that? Because I don't necessarily think that was needed, or, so I guess my experience is recommended treatment that really wasn't necessary just so they could increase their commission.
So, piggybacking on that, it's maybe Michelle's maybe talking about like maybe even outside of your comfort level. So like for me, anything that's more than a 7mm pocket, I'd rather have perio do that and not have me do that. Or, from the restorative side, maybe, I don't say overdiagnosing, but every crazed line that exists needs a crown, those types of things, because it's all about production. So you have to hit above a production goal so that you can get your bonus and so you can make more money and be more profitable. And then from the opposite side of it, when there's not compensation to produce, then you get lazy people that don't want to work. Clock in, clock out.
Mm-hmm. We've seen that too, because there's maybe no incentive really to do anything differently than kind of what's there. And it's easy to get in that rut, right? It's easy to do that and just leave and think about something else. And okay, so we've seen those same things. I think one of the things to combat the over-treatment and under-treatment is just periodically, regularly, every quarter, a couple times a year, just getting together as a team and saying, okay, like, what are our standards of care, and explaining that. So the case review is an exercise that we recommend, and that is just bringing cases to the table, the dentist, doing this, but the hygienist can initiate it too. So, hey, can we look at just a couple cases? I want to learn more about your treatment philosophy so that I can do a better job of recommending treatment that matches what you would recommend. And then the dentist, just sharing. I mean, we just did this recently with the team, and a lot of times one of those with the craze lines, the thing is, if I can draw and explore over it and it clicks, then there might be something more than a craze line there, right? But those exist in all of our teeth, right? I mean, we all have those. If you get loops that are magnified enough, you're going to see them everywhere. Yeah. So I think calibrating the treatment philosophy and making sure everybody's on the same page and being able to ask questions, that you're in a safe environment where you're together and like, okay, so tell me why you never want to do an MOD on a first molar. And then the dentist pulls up a picture of 3 first molars that have split in half, because of that. So I always encourage dentists to take op photos. So take photos of before you prep the tooth, during the prep. And Andrew, this would be great for you to do because you get to see all that. Like us, traditional hygienists, we never get to see that. Mm-hmm. So it's super valuable for the hygienist and for the business team to be able to see what's in there when you get in there and you're prepping these teeth. And why, because a lot of what's recommended is explained by what you see inside there. So we really encourage the dentist and the assistants to remind the dentist to take pictures, or the assistants to take the pictures for them is even better, from their perspective of, oh yeah, they need to see this. They need to see this. Okay. So some things that we see that are really good is it gives the hygienist a little more control over their income, and not feeling like they're kind of at the whim, of the dentist or the employer to, decide whether or not they're going to have an increase. A lot of times I will tell you that the dentist, this was my experience, is the dentist said, look, this bonus plan or this commission, this is your pay increase model. So there probably will not be frequent base pay increases, but we're going to increase fees in the practice. We're going to try to this is where it gets really tricky. If you're in a practice where you're in a whole lot of PPO plans and they have crappy reimbursement, then that can really be difficult. But a lot of times dentists will say, this is your pay increase plan. And so we're going to, here are the expectations. This is great for this to be written out. It can be part of the hygienist job description. Is expectations from the practice are that we are going to, do everything we can to have a healthy flow of patients into the practice with regards to marketing, reactivation efforts. And we expect the hygienist to be involved in that because very often they have really great relationships with the patients, and they can, call a patient, say, hey, this is Rachel. I've been missing you. What's happening? Where are you? How can we make this convenient and take care of you? So, hygienists have a little bit more control over their income. I feel like they tend to pitch in more on reactivation and things like that. And they want to look for solutions. I feel like they are then also a partner in diagnosis. So rather than depending on the dentist also to diagnose perio, right? They're really a lot more involved in that. They're being more proactive often with their patients. So, looking for first and foremost, what is in the patient's best interest? And we must never violate that. And that has to be one of those expectations so what I'm getting at is when we're going into some kind of alternate, or really with any job description, is we need to have a clear expectation of what are we doing ethically here? What are our ethical standards? What are our clinical care standards? What are our teamwork standards? And all of that compensation model is subject to like honoring all of those standards.
I'm actually very glad you said that. 'Cause sometimes that is what it feels like. Your ethics are being
compromised. Mm-hmm.
Yes, a lot tested almost.
Yes. And here's the other thing too, that I'm going to say as a consultant that sometimes we are guilty of is saying, okay, your goal is $1,500 a day. And if you just do 3 more fluorides, you're going to get to that. Well, that lasts for a little while, but we have got to first and foremost get to the bottom of why are we recommending this treatment? Mm-hmm. What's the benefit? Before we ever talk about production, what is the benefit to the patient? And if there is none, then we shouldn't be recommending it. So, that's in any kind of conversation, it needs to start with that. What are our standards of care? And why is this beneficial to the patient? And then, oh, by the way, this may be beneficial to us and to the practice because we're doing high level services. Mm-hmm. I find that the hygienists that have some skin in the game are more engaged.
Yep.
As a general rule.
Absolutely agree.
But as a general are more engaged, are looking for ways to be more efficient, to improve, to bring more services into their practice, to work at a higher level, to learn about what are some of the adjuncts that I might want to consider for periotherapy, because I've done scaling replaning and I'm not getting the response that we expected. What maybe should I've considered? What else is in my toolbox? And just being open to some higher level conversations. Some things that we've seen that were not so good with this was hygienists packing the schedule. So putting too many patients in the schedule to the point where we had one client a long time ago that had a hygienist that was she was really good and she could do a lot of diagnosis in a short period of time. But what we found was that she was not doing her clinical notes, and there would be days where patients would not have clinical notes. And so we had to say, your bonus and commission is subject to these things being completed. Mm-hmm. And so you cannot cut corners or you will not be paid your commission and you will not participate in the bonus. And then there had to be chart audits to make sure all those things stayed in place. So that was one that comes to my mind. The other one that is kind of tricky and hygienists that, I've seen some hygienists figure out is clocking out when you don't have patients, because if you don't have a patient, it brings your average hourly production down.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, sometimes the hygienists are sitting in the staff area and the rest of the team is just kind of working and doing what they can. And it just really creates a lot of resentment. It really is. I don't think that the financial gain that the hygienist might get, because honestly, I think in the grand scheme of things, it might be, less than $100, and not a day, less than $100 in, 2 weeks or a month or whatever. But what it's costing them is relationships within the team, respect from the team. And honestly, too, there are a lot of things that they can do during that time to help build the productivity of their schedule, right? I mean, they can be on the phone with patients. They can be following up on treatment. They can be lending a hand to somebody on the team that then in turn will lend a hand when maybe they need help with perio charting one day or, putting in a heavy treatment plan for a patient. So I think just making sure that we're looking at the big picture and not getting caught up in, the day-to-day minutia of, okay, well, if I clock out, then this open time is not going to affect my average hourly production. And so I'm just going to clock out. So that's tricky. And I see it from both sides. I mean, I get it from both sides.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you don't usually hear it from that side. You hear it from, I need to do things, but I've been told to clock out because I don't have a patient.
Right, because then the dentist doesn't want to pay for that time. Mm-hmm. And that's not right. I mean, your team is there. If you're expecting them to be there all day, then there's plenty of stuff to do and they should be compensated. Now,
yes, goes
if they're not participating and they don't have a patient and they're sitting in the reception area and they're clocked in, then that's a different conversation that needs to occur, right? That goes back to that job description that should be expectations, success points, like here's what it looks like to be successful in this role. Here's what is expected of you. Here's what we as a practice are going to do to ensure your success.
I think both Andrew and I are like the clocking out scheme. I'm not smart enough to figure that out.
I know.
That's
I am
clever.
not schemy and manipulative
Or mathematical enough. Be like, well, if I clock out for 10 minutes here, it's going to manipulate my numbers here.
Even people who embezzle, I'm like, I would never be able to figure that.
I don't know how to do that.
It's not that smart.
I know. And we go to those embezzlement courses and we're like, what? How did they ever figure out how to do that? And how did they have the tenacity to walk into a bank and open an account in somebody else's name and just crazy stuff. So
this has been very eye-opening.
Yeah. So I think what can be done to avoid those things is, having a really clear job description in place for all team members. And that is not often the case. I mean, a lot of times people are just, especially we were working with a team recently that had just, it's a big team and they have quite a few people on the business team, but there weren't any really clear roles. So everybody's just kind of doing what they think they need to do to make the day go. But really it's more effective if you have someone who, is accountable and in charge of, managing the hygiene schedule. I mean, this is a team that's got 6 hygienists. There should be a hygiene coordinator who's accountable for that. Because otherwise everybody's doing the best they can, but there's just no one at the end of the day to say, okay, what went really great? You crushed it, and or what do we need to work on? What are we really still struggling with? And everybody can pitch in, but you got to have kind of the point person and have clear expectations. So that is the thing. And the other thing is you can't think of everything in advance, right? So the dentist probably didn't think that the hygienists were going to figure out that it was better to clock out or that the hygienist was going to pack the schedule and not do clinical notes.
Right.
Right. So you can't think of everything, but just try to think of the things that you feel like, hey, we got to be mature about this and know that we are working as a team and we're not going to pull patients, from one schedule to the next because of production. Or, the other thing that sometimes happens too is if I recommended periotherapy and let's say I'm a really seasoned hygienist and I've been in this practice for 15 years and I recommend periotherapy for my patients, but I haven't blocked my schedule for that. And I don't have anywhere on my schedule for 3 months for this patient to come in, but Michelle does, then really it's in that patient's best interest to get that treatment done as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. So either I need to arrange and engineer my schedule to where it's going to accommodate that, or I need to pass that on to Michelle and allow that patient to get the treatment that they need. And that's tough.
To see that much money kind of move.
Yeah, 2-4 quads of periotherapy is really hard. So often what happens is they won't recommend periotherapy, right? Because they don't have the room on their schedule. So, and this thing just starts of, okay, we're just going to do the best we can today and then see them back. And then years go by. And it's not, I mean, it's not a people problem. It's a system problem. Mm-hmm. It's that, they physically don't have enough space in their schedule and they haven't talked about maybe hiring more hygienists, and more hygiene days. So that's another thing that we often help with is engineering the schedule so that they can grow. Even a hygienist that is very well established needs to have some new patients in his or her schedule, or it gets a little bit stale,
monotonous.
Right?
Yeah.
The monotony of it. Yeah.
And then the newer hygienist is coming in and he or she is seeing all of these periotherapies because they're seeing all the new patients. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just over here with, perio maintenance all day long. And it's great because these patients are healthy, but I need some influx of, new patients, just like a dentist.
Blood. Yeah.
Right. If everybody's fixed.
Well, Rachel, I know you guys are really heavy into prepping for Hinman, and I don't want to take up all your time. We really thank you for being here. I think this conversation, as Michelle and I were talking about it, and we actually have some little IMs here behind us, like, I never would have got the clocking out scheme. This is why we need people like you. And this is why the hygienists need to get in contact with you to know all of these nuances, because there's too many systems. They're all different. And people like you are the experts. So how can they get in contact with you to fix their practices?
So a couple ways. You can go to our website, inspiredhygiene.com, and there is a free CD. It's just shipping. It's $4.95 that we would love to share with anybody that kind of highlights some of the systems that, you want to kind of look at in your practice and see how they are. If you feel like you have those in place. Everybody can also get our book. And I think we have given a promo code in the past for our book. I don't remember what it is. So we're going to give a new promo code for our book. And the website to grab that is rohbook.com. And it's usually $19.95, but we're offering that for $12.95. And the promo code is TALE, TALE, all uppercase. Yeah. And so that will highlight some of these systems, and it talks a little bit about the 3-to-1 in there, and also is a good way to introduce your dentist if you feel like, hey, we could really use some help with these things. A good way to grab the book and introduce that and say, hey, I read this and I think there's some things in here that we could really incorporate. I'd love for you to read it, or I'd love for you to listen to the CD. So yeah, that's a great way to just kind of get a little bit more. And I know you guys are going to include a couple links that I shared in the show notes for some articles and a video and that kind of thing. Yeah, but thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to be with you guys. And I always enjoy all the kind of twists and turns that these conversations take. And it's fun just getting everybody's different perspectives.
Well, thank you so much for being here again. Hopefully we'll see you again in a year or so. Let's just do an annual.
I hope so. Not before.
I must say, I think sometimes that what would I have done if I was still every day in the trenches seeing patients and there were podcasts back then? Would I have been listening? I really do. I think I would, because
you're a weirdo.
Started one.
Right.
But I also would have loved to hear this. I've heard this information because, the business side of dentistry has always been something that has not been enjoyable. And I think these little tips and a little bit of a better understanding, like what Rachel gives us, would have made my day, well, maybe it wasn't day to day, but week to week or monthly moments when we do delve into business a little bit easier. Like there would have been less contention in those conversations. I would have been a little bit more open to having them.
I wish we could pull some audio from 3 years ago to now and watch your progression. It's a marvelous sight to see.
I don't love it. We don't. We will say this all over again. I don't love it, but I can deal with it.
And that's more than you could have 3 years ago. So truly. I will absolutely take that. And we will get you to being able to maybe still not love it, but tolerate it a lot better in the future. So, but it's people like Rachel, even though she's a UNC fan and Duke's going to beat them really handily later on in March Madness, which we just started and Duke just squeaked by. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We still trust her opinion on everything else.
Yeah, everything dental hygiene. Well, we really do thank you guys for listening with us another week. Continue to share where to find information with us and the podcast. If you love this episode, share it with your friends. You can find us on Facebook and also on Instagram. You are welcome to direct message us on either one of those platforms. And you can always go to our website, atale2hygienist.com, and send us a message. You can do that at atale2hygienist@gmail.com. And if you want to talk to Andrew, you can do it at andrew@atale2hygienist.com or michelle@atale2hygienist.com, whatever works for you. And yeah, thanks. Another week in the books. 165, closer to Andrew's retirement from the podcast.
Closer. Was that 35 more episodes, and then I'm supposed to retire? Supposed to hang up my headphones.
I'll get you a golden mic and hang your headphones on it.
We'll see, because this is starting to get even better than I ever planned it to be. So I don't know if I'm quite ready to leave yet, but we'll see. We will just see. 35 more weeks is a long way away. So we'll just see.
It'll be here before you know it, though.
Hey, can I just put in one last little plug before we close the show? Look, everyone, two things I need from you, actually. One, I need more iTunes reviews.
Yeah.
I ran out of things to read. So if you guys would do that for us, that'd be very, very fantastic.
We'd love it.
And don't forget to not only just write a review, but also rate us, so that way people can find us. But also, look, we offer a lot of free CE, and PDT has generously offered to pay for that for you.
Pay for that CE,
if you guys, Yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind, just head over to the website, look in the show notes, look at all the different things to find out where each episode CE is, or which episode does qualify for CE, and take the test. You listen to the episodes already; it's a no-brainer, but it's something that we've really worked hard on creating for you. And, thank you to all the people that have helped us on the back end, Mike and Lacey and everyone that's creating the tests. And thank you to CE Zoom and, of course, PDT for sponsoring it. I mean, it's a bigger project than what it maybe seems like, but I would love for you guys to go out and check out some of the CE. I mean, let's do this.
And also, when you're at the trade shows, go and see what PDT is doing. They just actually put out a new set of very cool implant instruments for these hybrid cases. They have tons of instruments. If you're used to only using the 5 instruments that we learned in school, they will blow your mind with the things that they have. So go check them out.
Awesome. Good show, buddy. Good show.
Yep. You're going to say goodbye?
I was going to let it be awkward for a little while longer and then maybe
the story
say
of your life, our relationship.
What? Awkward is the story of my life. It is true. But all right, everyone, have a great week.
Yeah. Bye, y'all.
Bye.